Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFO DFS Report. It is Wednesday, March the 5th. I hope everyone's having a fine Wednesday afternoon. We have a nice looking 5-game slate on our hands this evening. We also have a 5-game slate that starts at 7:30 Eastern time, which is always nice to get that extra 30 minutes to build your lineups, especially if you're like me, who has built exactly 0 lineups so far today, and it is 2.5 hours until lock. So as always, we're here to help break down the slate, figure out what we're going to play, and then build lineups afterwards. So yesterday, not great. Yesterday's slate was a bit of a gong show. Luckily for me, I did pretty well in the late slate, kind of saved the day. Anaheim, I told you, Zach, the Ducks, man, they're playing well, and they certainly continued to play well last night. Absolutely. I thought that game was going to be close. I faded the Oilers for the most part because of that, but I never anticipated what ended up actually happening. I'm sure you're not feeling great today.
Yeah, no, it was shit stomping last night for my Oilers. I was on the pre and post game show for Oilers Nation last night, and yeah, it was pretty rough after that game, man. Pretty rough. We actually ended up having people donate us money to not talk about the scoring summary, go through all of the goals that were scored against the Oilers. So yeah, pretty bleak there. Feels a little dark right now here in Edmonton.
The good news is that they are, it's a trade deadline in a couple days. They have a chance to kind of fix things. Jim B brings up a nice point yesterday. Brock, I am off Nashville until further notice. Nashville, I took that personally. And they did. I swear to God, every time I buy in just a touch on the Boston Bruins, they do that. So I think I'm out on that until further notice as well. I just traded Jack Hughes for Tage Thompson the other day. Big W for me. Yeah. Unfortunately, if you saw or if you didn't see the tweet a few minutes ago, we have a Jack Hughes update for you. It is far from ideal if you are a Anaheim or Nashville. Where is it? Jesus, how many tweets do we do a day? If you're a New Jersey Devils fan, New Jersey Devils announced that Jack Hughes underwent shoulder surgery today, will be placed on long-term injured reserve. Hughes is expected to make a full recovery and available for training camp. That is far from ideal, as we said. Let's get into tonight's 5-game slate, shall we? We've got Igor Shesterkin likely to get the start for the New York Rangers. Charlie Lindgren confirmed to get the nod for the Washington Capitals. Arvid Soderblom will give Spencer Knight a break after he made 41 saves the other night. Linus Ullmark gets the start for the Ottawa Senators. Aiden Hill confirmed to get the nod for the Vegas Golden Knights. It'll be Joseph Woll likely to get the nod for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Darcy Kemper versus the red-hot St. Louis Blues, who will roll with Jordan Binnington. And then you've got Kevin Lankinen versus the projected John Gibson in net. Obviously, Lucas Dostal going last night for the Ducks. And no Quinn Hughes for the Vancouver Canucks. Real tough time to be a Hughes brother right now. Normally, it's a good time. Right now, bad time. Let's get into tonight's slate. We've got the New York Rangers hosting the Washington Capitals. Pretty much toss up here. Both teams with a 3.1 implied total. Kind of middle of the pack tonight. I'm going to warn you now. The charts are spicy today. We're going to have fun on this show. Basically top 6 against top 6, bottom 6 against bottom 6 in this game. Good matchups for the entire top 6 of the New York Rangers. Pretty good matchups across the board for the Washington Capitals. By and large, tonight's slate looks pretty low event. Not a single game over 98.1 pace score. So very lower event slate, which could be make things pretty interesting. The Rangers top line, let's just get right into it. They grade out number 1 overall for me. A little surprised by that, but they're also drawing a ton of ownership. They've been playing pretty well. They're also only $17,300. I think that definitely helps the ownership argument tonight. Really easy to get to them at 17,300. So they look pretty good. Washington 2 and Washington 1 come out 3rd and 4th though. So this is a game that the charts really like, but the public is in love with it as well. A lot of ownership coming in on this game. You've got Washington 1 as the 2nd highest owned line overall. You've got New York 1 as the 6th highest and Washington 2 as the 7th highest lines overall. And honestly, breaking top 10 is New York 2. So plenty of ownership coming in on this game. One that the public likes, one that the charts like. I think it's easy to get to this game, right? There's a lot of love here for both teams in terms of the matchup scores. The underlying metrics for the top line of the New York Rangers continues to be just very, very good. The second line's been solid, right? Will Cooley's one of the best value plays pretty much every night right now. Kind of the only value play most nights. And both teams just not very good defensively, to be totally honest with you. And then the top 6, as we know, with the Washington Capitals, when they have this lineup construction, this lineup configuration, they've been very, very good offensively this year, just scoring at will. In terms of the power play for this game, pretty good as well. 5th best overall. Both teams' power plays have been pretty good. Both teams' penalty kills have been pretty good, kind of middle of the pack. The Capitals, 3rd best. The Rangers, 5th best on tonight's slate. So, Zach, Lot to break down here with this one. This is the kind of the big game of the night, the one that it seems the entire night could mostly hinge on. Over their last 10 games, both teams kind of middle of the pack here in terms of defensive metrics overall at 5v5, but also kind of lower on the totem pole in terms of 5v5 metrics in terms of offense. So kind of an interesting one. Rock meets hard place in this game. I've got plenty of interest on both sides. I'll let you start in giving me who you like the most and why.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the public here. I think I got quite a bit of interest here in this game myself. I think a lot of my interest is coming in on that Washington one line, similarly to the public here. Alex Ovechkin, just all the guy is doing is shooting the puck and scoring goals. Like quite literally, that's all he does out there on the ice right now. 12 and a half shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games, 2 goals per hour of ice time. Oh, yeah, and he's lit up the Rangers pretty much every time he's played against them in his career. 45 goals and 71 points in 75 games played. The reason that I'm leaning a little bit more towards this Washington one line than the second line is really just past success. Dylan Strome's got 12 points in 14 games against them. Alexei Protas, 7 points in 9 games played. McMichael, Dubois, and Wilson, they've all kind of struggled against the Rangers in their career. McMichael, 3 points in 8 games played. Dubois, 8 and 19. Tom Wilson, 15 and 44. I think they're an okay play. I think I'll definitely be getting to them, probably right around the field at 10% here. I just think I kind of agree with the public here and liking this top line a little bit more for the Capitals. On the Rangers side of things, similarly, more of my interest is coming in on that top line. I don't really know how much of this second line I'm going to get to, even though they do have the better matchup in this game. I like Will Cooley a lot as a one-off here. He's been providing solid value for the pricing that hasn't changed from earlier in the season at $3,600. So definitely going to have a lot of Cooley here tonight. Maybe mix in a little bit of some stacks. But I think with the Rangers side of things, I mean, it's just so easy to get to that top line price-wise. $17,300. I think that's where a lot of my Rangers ownership is going to go. I'll probably be over the field on New York 1 tonight.
Yeah, I think a little bit more of my interest comes on the New York Rangers side of things than the Washington Capitals side of things. Just Charlie Lindgren really hasn't been all that great. I think he's got like an 886 save percentage in his last handful of games, a little bit more than that. So obviously a bit of a goaltending advantage for the Rangers with Shesterkin getting the nod there. Obviously we know he can have blow up games too, but I like the Rangers a lot more. I like both lines. Obviously the top line grades out number 1 for me, so I'm not going to not play them. But then the second line's been really, really solid. Since the break, Miller and Zibanejad lead the way in points. Miller leading the way with 10 points overall, 5 goals, 5 assists in 6 games. Zibanejad 2 goals, 5 assists for 7 points. Will Cooley is tied with ahead of both Lafreniere and Trocheck with 4 points in 6 games, including 3 goals. So he's the second highest goal scorer on the team since the break. I just think that both lines are in really good spots. I think, obviously New York 2's played pretty well, and they end up coming in the lowest owned of the 4 lines here. So I think that I've got a lot of interest in them as a result. I think obviously 15,800 is a pretty good price tag on that trio too. So yeah, the Rangers is a lot cheaper. It feels like, I guess not a lot cheaper, but a lot easier to get to with Lindgren getting the start. The Capitals are fairly cheap as well, which is why I think they're garnering a lot of ownership. In terms of production since the break for them, it's been pretty evenly split among those 2 lines. Obviously Ovechkin drawing a ton of attention here, 22%. I'm going to get to Washington a decent amount, probably 10% of each line, and not get too carried away past that. Where the Rangers, I think I'll be closer to like 15, 20% on New York 1 and New York 2. I just feel pretty good about them in this spot on home ice. They've been playing a lot better here. They look pretty good out of the break. And yeah, that Miller Zibanejad duo has found some success. So I'm going to be a little bit heavier on the Rangers than the Capitals. Are you the opposite of me, or are you going to be pretty even between your ownership between the 2?
I think probably pretty even. Again, I think I'll probably be a little over the field on that Rangers top line and probably on the Capitals top line as well. I'll have some sprinkles of the second lines here. I like this Washington 2 line. Like, obviously, we played a ton of them earlier this season. The big issue for me is that, Connor McMichael's shooting percentage has just completely fallen off. He's just not scoring at all here as of late. 6.5 shooting percentage. over his last 20 games versus 16% on the season. So really, really coming back down to earth. And even Pierre-Luc Dubois has seen a similar dip too, shooting 6.4% versus 14.5% on the season. I think anything that I build with Washington too is going to include Tom Wilson on it, because he's the one of those three who's really been scoring a lot of goals here as of late, 1.5 per hour over his last 20 games, a little bit more shot volume than the other two as well. So I've got some interest for sure, but I think I'm going to be a little heavier on those top lines than the public is.
Worth mentioning, since the break, Alex Ovechkin by far and away the leader in terms of individual expected goals for the Capitals, but second on the team is Connor McMichael, and the scoring has picked up a little bit since the break. 3 goals on 18 shots in 6 games. Pierre-Luc Dubois is fourth on the team in terms of individual expected goals during that time as well. So that line's been pretty solid. And yeah, I mean, the price tag is very reasonable, 15,300. So, it's very easy to see why the ownership is there. You take a look at a lot of these games as a whole, it doesn't necessarily feel like a lot of high pace, high event games outside of this one. So, plenty of exposure to this game, similar to the field, unfortunately, because I thought this one might be a little bit more sneaky. And then I pulled up the ownership. I'm like, oh man, New York 1 is like literally the one of the chalkiest lines on the slate. So kind of unfortunate, but let's get to game number 2. We've got the Blackhawks and the Senators. Now, another super interesting game. And this slate's so funny, right? Like, it starts at 7:30 and then you just have this huge wait until the last 3 games. So like a lot of ownership really coming in on both the Capitals and the Rangers, and then the Senators as well. Lots of ownership coming in on those 2 games. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how the slate shakes out once the late game starts, with a much lower ownership coming in on those late games outside of Vegas, of course. But yeah, Ottawa 1 projects to be the highest owned line on the slate. Brady Tkachuk, 22.7%. Stützle and Giroux around 10%. They grade out 10th best for me. Now, we'll get to this in a second, because this is where I see that the charts are pretty spicy. I think that the ownership's obviously pretty high, but not crazy high. It feels like a somewhat decent fade spot, but they're not that high owned where it's like I need to really feel like I need to plant a flag. But there's a reason why the charts don't like them. Number one, the time on ice breakdown for the Senators as of late, this is all since the break, is very similar to what you see out of like the Dallas Stars, right? Like the Stars top line is great, but they don't play it maybe enough to be like considered one of those upper echelon lines, despite their success. Number 2, this trio really hasn't been all that dominant. And then the really third and most important part is that they're going to see basically their entire ice time, 60% roughly, against that second line. So that's the Donato Teravainen line, which has been super, super good defensively. It's kind of reminiscent of like the Jason Dickinson line, where they just match up against the options best and have shut them down. So we've seen Teravainen in that role this year. We've seen Mikheyev in that role. We haven't seen Donato really in that role, but they've done a really, really nice job. So I do think this is a bit of a tricky matchup for Ottawa 1. It's not going to really stop me from getting to them, just because they do feel a little bit matchup proof. Just Brady Tkachuk's shot volume is so insane. Tim Stützle is just unbelievable. I love watching Tim Stützle play hockey. The blue line, Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot. I mean, look at these projections for these guys on the blue line tonight. Projected 29 minutes for Jake Sanderson, which just seems outrageous. He played 31 minutes the other night. Basically, Sanderson, Chabot, and Artem Zub just don't come off the ice, essentially, is what's been happening. So I do love getting to the Ottawa Senators tonight. I do think I could end up coming a little bit under the field on Ottawa 1. I hope you have a slightly different feel than I do in that regard, but Ottawa 3 really sticks out as an interesting value play to me tonight. They have the number 1 matchup score overall. They're also playing a ton, the exact same amount of ice time as the top line. Their underlying metrics aren't amazing, but they're pretty solid. But their matchup here is just, it's the best on the slate. And they're really, really cheap. 14,200 to get to Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto, Michael Amadio. I'll probably end up more on like a Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto mini stack than I will playing Michael Amadio. But I think that they're in a super interesting spot. You can pair them with some of these more expensive lines, and they look like a nice value option there. Similarly though, like Ottawa 2 has a good matchup as well. Their matchup is super, super good compared to Ottawa 1. And their underlying metrics leave a lot to be desired, but we know that there's enough talent on that line where it still feels like I'm okay getting there with David Perron at 5K, Josh Norris 5,100, and Drake Batherson 6,400. Plenty of talent there. Decent price tag, really good matchup. So I think what I'm trying to get at is it feels like everyone's kind of flocking to Ottawa 1, where I think my ownership on the Sens tonight is probably going to end up being a little bit more spread out. What are your thoughts here, Zach?
Yeah, I got bit by Ottawa 1 last week. I can't exactly remember which game it was, but I went pretty heavy in on him in terms of the full stacks. Didn't quite work out very well for me. I think I kind of agree here. Like I like the idea of coming in a little bit under here on this Ottawa side of things, especially from the forward group. Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle is where most of my interest is going to be. I'll definitely be meeting them at the field for their ownership, maybe even a little bit above as well. I mean, Brady Tkachuk at 22.7% ownership right now. Tim Stützle at 11.6. I think it's fairly easy to get a little bit over the field, especially on Brady Tkachuk. I mean, 13.8 shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games, 1.8 individual expected goals. Probably should be shooting at a higher percentage than he is. I mean, just 6.3 over the last 29.5 on the season. This feels like a spot where he might be able to find the back of the net. But this Chicago team's kind of playing sneaky good hockey here as of late. Like it just feels like they're kind of finding their stride maybe a little bit here. Obviously, we saw what they did the other night against the LA Kings with Spencer Knight in the crease, right? Obviously, Arvid Soderblom is a bit of a different goaltender, but like he's been having a good year. When he's getting ice time, 29 games played, a 906 save percentage, 7.6 goals saved above expected. Like that's a pretty fairly good numbers, all things considered, considering who he's been playing in front of all season long. So, I don't mind getting down a little bit to these depth pieces as well. I mean, that third line, as you mentioned, fairly easy to build around at 14,200 for a full stack. I don't know if I'm going to get there a ton, but I think, sprinkling them in 5% is pretty easy thing to do. The second line, it kind of intrigues me a little bit. Like I like these players individually. It just, they haven't really found their stride together, haven't really been able to click. So probably going to be pretty heavy on that Tkachuk Stützle mini stack. And then the defenseman, I mean, I'm probably going to have a lot of Jake Sanderson and Thomas Chabot here tonight.
I'm just trying to completely finish my last 10 trends chart here, so I can pull it up because, like, I mean, they won the other night, but the Kings really have struggled quite a bit as of late. Really struggled on this road trip, and Spencer Knight obviously stood on his head. They still give up 40 plus shots in that game, so I do think that the Sens are certainly super viable. Here's the trends chart: 3.23 expected goals against per 60 at 5v5 over the last 10 is horrific. The Sens offense, though, pretty anemic as of late, but obviously getting Brady TK back helps. Yeah, this number's scary. Like, I just don't know if it's all going to come from Ottawa 1. I think that the wealth could be spread out a little bit, but I could see why you would want to be heavier on that top line. They'd feel like the most sure thing without a doubt. I'm going to put my faith in the charts a little bit here and lean on Ottawa 3 a little bit more heavily than probably you are, and Ottawa 1. Still going to get there, just they like the raw projections obviously absolutely love them. So that's why, like, I'm not going to get completely away from them. Like, they look like the best play on the slate, and why they're so high owned makes sense, but I'm just not going to get too carried away. I don't think. Okay, power play in this one. Pretty modest on both sides, middle of the pack, fourth best for the Sens, sixth best, for the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks PK, we talked about being pretty good the other day. It's been awesome over the last 10 games. Sens and the Blackhawks kind of both in the middle of the pack in terms of power play and penalty kill there. So another reason why maybe it's not like I'm not going to fall too in love with Ottawa tonight, but like after putting up 40, seeing the Kings put up 40 shots the other night, like it's not out of the realm of possibility that Ottawa just goes in there and blows the doors off of the Blackhawks tonight. Like, it's still certainly possible, but that second line at least poses a little bit of an issue for Ottawa 1. Vegas and Toronto. I feel like I haven't talked about Vegas in forever. Like, when was the last time they played hockey? Saturday? It's Wednesday. They last played on Sunday against the Devils. Oh yeah, the night that Jack Hughes got hurt. And then prior to that, they had 2 nights off. So this is their first game their second game in a week. Very well rested. Meanwhile, the Maple Leafs in that same time span have played 1, 2, 3 games. Okay, it's not crazy, but still, well-rested Vegas team here on home ice, minus 157 home favorites, 3.5 total to 2.8 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The public really, really likes Vegas tonight. The top line is the third highest owned line on the slate. The second line is the 5th highest owned line on the slate. Matchup-wise, it looks pretty similar for both those lines. The matchups are kind of just all over the place for Vegas, so it's hard to really take too much from the matchups. The underlying metrics definitely favors the top line. The second line still been pretty good. We know how good that Hurdle and Dorofeyev have been this year together. The issue I have with Vegas one mostly is just like Tanner Pearson feels like meh up there. Jack Eichel, Mark Stone mini stack feels fine. Pearson I'll probably get to a little bit. In terms of the ownership and what the public's doing with that, Tanner Pearson 6%, Jack Eichel 19%, Stone 15%. I still lean towards the second line. Just I love that value. Hurdle and Dorofeyev are always kind of like mid 5K. They're both drawing a decent amount of ownership. I think Brandon Saad's been pretty solid since arriving in Vegas as well. Obviously, he didn't really land for us the other night when he was on the top line, but for the most part, he's been okay. In their last, since the break, Jack Eichel yet to score a goal. It's only been 4 games. Hurdle has 2 goals, 2 assists. Dorofeyev has 1 goal, no assist, but he has 12 shots on goal. So still, the shot volume really good for Dorofeyev. Hurdle's been solid. Noah Hannafin leads the way with 13 shots on goal in 4 games since the break. So I think this seems a bit difficult to target. I don't know if I'll end up meeting the field. I feel like I'm probably going to come in a little bit lower owned on Vegas than the field is, but they grade out 15th and 18th best. Like I just don't, and 22nd best. Like I really just don't see it, to be honest with you. I think that, look at the trends chart here. The Maple Leafs haven't been great defensively. So like, sure. The Vegas Golden Knights probably deserve a better fate than what they've had recently. This team just has seemed like they just can't score as of late. And I don't know if I want to play a chalky Vegas against a pretty good Maple Leafs team. Like, no, Kristanov obviously hurts, but the Leafs are probably going to be pretty pissed off after losing to the Sharks the other night. I don't know. I feel like they're a little bit too high owned for my liking tonight. I'm still going to mix them in without question, but probably not at the same level the field is.
Yeah, I actually agree with you here on this Vegas side of things. I actually bet Leafs money line this morning, like plus 135 right now. That feels like a pretty nice number for this Toronto team. The offense has been a bit anemic here for the Vegas Golden Knights. Kind of feels like they're maybe waiting to get a punch in the arm from a trade or something like that here ahead of the deadline. You mentioned Jack Eichel struggles. Hurdle and Dorofeyev continuing to lead the way offensively here for this Vegas Golden Knights team. Over their last 20 games, Hurdle 2 goals per hour of ice time versus 1.9 individual expected, 9.5 shots on goal per hour. He looks like a great play. Pavel Dorofeyev continues to provide that great floor for you out there. 1.8 goals per hour of ice time, 10.7 shots on goal per hour. I think for me with my Vegas ownership, I'm going to be heavy on that second line and probably coming in a little under the field here on that top line. Mark Stone, it's just tough for me to get there on a regular basis with him. The shot volume hasn't quite been there as of late. The offensive production is pretty modest, all things considered. I mean, 0.7 goals per hour over his last 22.4 points. Those are decent numbers, I suppose, but it feels like you just kind of are left wanting more from this Vegas one line on a pretty consistent basis here. Like, it doesn't really feel like Jack Eichel's broken many slates like that or anything when I've played them, at least this season here. So I got a little more interest coming in on this Vegas second line than I think that top line here tonight in this spot.
Toronto, obviously pretty interesting, right? We kind of talk about them all the time and being like, hey, when they're high owned, I will try to come in under the field. When they're low owned, I'm going to play them. It's one of those nights, 6% owned. It is the 17th highest owned line on the slate. A little bit has to do with the fact that Roto Grinders just seems to hate Matthew Nyes. He never projects for like any ownership. But Matthews just 13.9%, and then Marner at just 3.6%. So all that ownership is basically on Matthews. And they grade as the second best line overall for us. 22,800, obviously super expensive, but the matchup for them far from ideal, but the underlying metrics have just been ridiculous all season long. So I don't mind getting there tonight. The matchup for the second line is a little bit better, but basically splitting hairs here. I played them fairly successfully the other night. I don't know, like with Holmberg up there, it does, it feels a little bit more matchup dependent, but they are still playing a ton. The power play in this one, the Golden Knights have the second best power play advantage on the slate. Their power play has been the 4th best against the 16th best penalty kill. So again, a little bit of a nod to Vegas there. I think that makes me, similar. I don't think it changes my outlook much. I still like Hurdle and Dorofeyev quite a bit. I still like Noah Hannafin's shot volume coming out of the break. Him on the top power play unit, he feels like a good one-off. You can stack with either line. I don't mind it. I just don't think I'm going to get, again, too carried away with Vegas. The Leafs power play has been solid too. 10th best. They face a penalty kill that's really struggled. 24th best. The problem is that the Vegas Golden Knights just don't take penalties. So for the most part, this game feels relatively bleak, but I do feel like I'm going to end up being under the field on Vegas and over the field on Toronto in this spot. I similarly bet the Maple Leafs tonight. Just before I get back to you on your Leafs take here, which D pair plays the most with Pinto's line. So I just looked back quickly at their last 3 games. It's a pretty even split between the Sanderson and Shabbat pair because they don't really come off the ice, but a slight lean towards the Jake Sanderson line plays a little bit more with the Pinto line. But Zach, what are you doing here with the Maple Leafs?
Yeah, I like the Leafs here. Obviously, again, bet them on the money line here this morning. They look like they're in a good spot overall. This top line, as you kind of mentioned, coming in with pretty low ownership here. It's worth mentioning, they're the most expensive line on the slate to full stack, $22,800. And just given the fact that there's so much ownership coming in on Ottawa 1, it just feels like people are more comfortable paying $1,000 less to go with that Ottawa 1 line. And to me, it feels like, Toronto 1 to me is probably the better play here on this slate. I like Austin Matthews, kind of goes without saying, he's been pretty solid here as of late. 1.5 goals per hour. I think we'd like to see a little bit more goal scoring from him, but still solid floor with 11 shots on goal per hour of ice time. Produces points very well. 9 goals and 12 points in 11 games played against the Golden Knights. Mitch Marner, he's had success against Vegas as well. 4 goals, 14 points in 11 games played. I don't mind sprinkling in some of this second line here as well with John Tavares and William Nylander. I mean, the power play has been clicking at a pretty good rate here with them going with the 5 defensemen that they've or the 5 forwards, I should say, that they're running on that top power play unit. I have no issue getting down here to this second line as well. So I think I'm probably going to be fairly in on the Toronto Maple Leafs here, specifically within this top 6 tonight. Again, grading out as the second and sixth best lines overall on the slate. Very low ownership. And as you mentioned, that's a way that I like to attack the Leafs when they have lower ownership.
I think one thing too is like Matthews maybe not looking himself at times this year. Coming out of the break though, he's looked really solid. The numbers are grayed out very nicely. 24 shots in 6 games, obviously just insanely good there. Shooting just 8.3%, so not converting as much as you'd probably like to see, and positive regression is likely to come his way. Lapping the field from the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of individual expected goals during the time, those 6 games, 5.02 expected goals, scoring just 2. So 3 full goals scored below expected in just 6 games. He's been all around it, generating a ton of chances, and hopefully, the dam breaks a little bit for him tonight. And that's probably, again, where most of my ownership is going to come in, is that top line, and probably a lot of Matthews one-offs where I can squeeze him in at $9,000. Okay. LA and St. Louis. We just talked about LA. Didn't have the best time on their road trip. I feel like they won the first game and then did not win after that. I'm going to confirm that here. So they actually lost all 3 games on the road trip. Lost 6-2 in Dallas, 4-1 in St. Louis, and 5-1 in Chicago. They've lost 4 in a row overall. The Blues handled them pretty easily in St. Louis. I don't know if that'll end up being the case again tonight, but this Blues team is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from what is going on in LA right now. They are winning games. They are scoring goals like crazy. Since the break, they are, 4-1-1, and they've scored 3-3-7, 5-4, 3 goals during that stretch. Offense has been absolutely on fire. Take a look at the trends chart here. Really, really fortunate, probably. 2.47 expected goals for per 60, 3.32 actual goals. They are humming along at a 12.7 team shooting percentage. Really, really strong number there. The Kings obviously good defensively. We know that. But the St. Louis team, is just humming along here. And I think I want to get back to them and just kind of ride the hot hand. And it's mostly due to the fact that they're not going to see any ownership tonight. They are not expensive whatsoever. This top line is only $14,800 at under 4% ownership. I'm in for that. The second line is even cheaper, $1,000 cheaper. They are seeing a little bit more ownership, specifically Jordan Kyrou as a one-off, $5,000, just 13.2% ownership there. So I love getting to St. Louis 1 here. The ownership is super low. They have not a good matchup, but the best matchup on the Blues side of things, and they're by far and away the best offensive line that the Blues have. So if the matchups end up being the way they look right now, where it's a lot of Byfield against the Kyrou line, That's a horrific matchup for the Kyrou line, and they're drawing much more ownership. So if that ends up being the case, I'm going to be in on St. Louis 1 as they face mostly the Kopitar line, which, again, not slouches defensively, but about average on tonight's slate. And then the third line, the Dano line, same thing, about average on this slate. So I think that bodes very nicely for St. Louis 1 in this matchup. And again, they're only 14,800. They're seeing much less ownership than St. Louis 2. I'm interested here. And they also, aren't great on the power play. The Kings are good on the PK, so like that's going to kind of hamper things overall. Like I'm not going to get too carried away with St. Louis because I do think, their upside is relatively limited. This does feel like a lower scoring game, but I do think St. Louis 1 is in an interesting spot overall. Same breath, the Kings power play struggled mightily, but the Blues penalty kill has been horrendous. So I do think that heading back to home ice here, there's bounce back potential for the LA Kings. We know that the second and third line have been really, really solid as of late. The third line just continues to be an unbelievable value. They're up to 15,400 again tonight. Their price didn't really drop. But Warren Foegele hit the shot volume in like the first period the other night. He's shooting the puck a ton. Trevor Moore, same thing. So I still like them as a mini stack and getting back to them. And LA2 grades out 5th best overall. They're playing a ton. They're only $18,000. They absolutely screwed me the other night. But I don't mind getting back to them. Byfield just 3.7% ownership is probably too low. Laferriere was great the other night at $4,700. Fiala's gotten up there a bit, but I do think that there's some bounce back appeal here heading back to home ice. Still a team that's generating a decent amount of looks. They've been really solid on the power play in terms of generating scoring chances, just not converting. And now they face a Blues penalty kill that's just been getting crushed as of late. So I'm not going to get too carried away with this game as a whole. I'm going to probably sprinkle in about 10% St. Louis 1 and then 10% on the King side of things because it does feel a little bit lower scoring. But I'm just going to try to ride the Blues hot hand here a little bit. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I think this is an interesting game for sure. I'm feeling a little bitter towards the LA Kings right now. Went pretty hard in on them against the Blackhawks the other night. Did not go very well. But I'm willing to go back to the well here. I mean, especially with the second line, the shot volume that you get from Kevin Fiala and Alex Laferriere is just tremendous. I mean, Fiala 11.1 shots on goal per hour over his last 20, 9.6 for Laferriere. I would like to see a little bit more juice coming out of Quinton Byfield here. Feels like he's kind of really been sluggish here as of late. Hasn't been a ton of shot volume, but I'm willing to give this line another shot here. In terms of a full stack. I mean, you play one Quinton Byfield in a 20 max tonight, you're automatically over the field on him, given he's only 3.7% owned. So I have no issue getting back to around 10% LA2 tonight here. Mix in some of these power play stacks a little bit as well here. I think, I don't mind the idea of building something around like, an Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, Alex Laferriere stack. Going to be a little bit expensive, but I think there's some value on this slate that you can find ways to kind of build around that. So I don't hate that idea whatsoever. LA3, I got a little interest there as well. I mean, Warren Foegele, it was actually the first 8 minutes of that game against the Blackhawks that he had 5 shots on goal. So absolutely kind of wild to see that there. But he's been flying here as of late. Great shot volume for him. Probably should see a few more goals here coming sooner rather than later. This could be a decent spot for him to find the back of the net tonight. I agree with you on the St. Louis side of things. I'm going to be getting up over the field on St. Louis 1 for sure. I'll get around 10% on them. I don't mind doing that whatsoever. 12th best line to target overall on this slate here. I'll probably sprinkle in a little bit of this second line on the Blues here as well. Obviously got a bit of a soft spot for Dylan Holloway, given that he started his career with the Edmonton Oilers. And boy, do I wish he was still an Edmonton Oiler, Brock. Boy, do I wish that. Good shot volume and scoring rates between him and Jordan Kyrou over their last 20 games. So I like the idea of riding the hot hand here a little bit with the Blues as well. And I mean, the goaltending has just really let the Kings down as of late here, right? 885 save percentage over their last 10 games, really struggling on that penalty kill. So I don't mind this idea at all of getting to some of this game here, getting a little over the field here.
It's interesting. You guys are really in need of a second line winger and a left shot defenseman. Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought, eh?
Just to get back to LA3 for a minute. Since the break, where are they? Since the break, the team leaders in individual expected goals for first by a wide margin is Warren Foegele at 3.6. And second is Trevor Moore at 2.2. So they are also each have scored 3 goals since the break. They've been very, very productive. So I like getting back to LA3 a little bit tonight as well. Let's move it along to the final game of the night. We've got the Vancouver Canucks and the Anaheim Ducks, minus 186 home favorites for the Canucks. This is still a team that is very difficult to trust when Quinn Hughes is out of the lineup, which he will be tonight. And the way that they kind of just have the lineup constructed, it does make things a little bit tricky to figure out exactly who you want to play. Joshua, Pettersson, Garland, then you got Connor, Philip Heidel, Lecker-Mackey back in the NHL, then you've got Suter, Besser, DeBrusk. So things are really broken up here. Now, I don't know for sure if Tyler Myers is actually going to be on power play 1. He took over for Quinn Hughes on power play 1 in practice yesterday. I don't know if he was just a placeholder because they were expecting Quinn Hughes to play, or if that's what's actually going to happen. I think there's a decent chance that Philip Hronek's just on both units. I will probably end up with more Philip Hronek than I will Tyler Myers. I don't really trust this. That's why you watch this show, because a lot of people will just go to Daily Faceoff and be like, Tyler Myers, best play ever. Could end up being, but I'm just not 100% sold. I'm the one that does the line combination, so I know what's going on here, and I'm not 100% certain that that's going to be the case. So really like Philip Hronek. We've seen him play a shitload, but yeah, the power play here regardless is really not been all that good. 19th best for the last 10 games. They do have a decent matchup here against the 27th ranked penalty kill, which is the number 1 power play advantage on the slate. A little bit freaky there. But yeah, the way that this lineup is constructed, it's kind of all over the map, right? Like you've got guys from just different lines playing together. You've got Heidel and Lecker-Mackey together on that top line. You've got Besser and DeBrusk together on that top power play unit. But then that's a top power play unit that's only going to see about 50% of the ice time. And then you're going to have Pettersson and Garland together on that other power play unit. So matchup wise, it's all kind of the same. Underlying metric wise, it's kind of the same. The second line grades out a little bit better. Elias Pettersson just refuses to shoot the puck. Since the break, he has 2 shots in 5 games. So there's that. Jake DeBrusk, Philip Heidel lead the way in terms of individual expected goals created or generated. It's brutal, man. Like, I just don't know what to think about this team. I don't know who to play. I think with Gibson and net, and this being the second half of a back-to-back, like, I want to play Vancouver. I just have a hard time figuring out where to go. I am probably in agreement with the public that it's Philip Heidel's been their best player. And Lecker-Mackey is a talented young player at $2,500. I feel better about Lecker-Mackey than I did Savoy last night in the exact same game, basically. So Heidel Lecker-Mackey is probably the route that I'm going to end up going. And then I probably, again, agree with the public where it's DeBrusk, Suter, and Besser. I have a hard time trusting Elias Pettersson in any fashion tonight. Where is he overall? He's still generating 10% ownership at $6,100. I just don't see how that is going to make it in my lineup. So in terms of like what the charts actually think, is Vancouver 3 and Vancouver 2 better plays than Vancouver 1? That's what the public thinks as well. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Zach, any different opinions?
I'm really tempted to just completely fade the Vancouver Canucks on the main slate.
20 John Gibson lineups.
Yes. I don't know, man. I just have a hard time figuring out really where to go here. I mean, I think I might have most of my interest in that third line. Like, it feels like they're the ones who are kind of maybe going to be able to provide the offense. Jake DeBrusk and Brock Besser down there, 2 of the best pure goal scorers, I suppose, on the Canucks side of things. Pius Suter's name is kind of floating around there in trade rumors as well this week. Maybe he tries to go out and have a big game or something like that here tonight, or, maybe they showcase him a little bit and he sees an increase in minutes. I think I might just sprinkle like 5% on each of these lines on the main slate. I have no issue playing Lecker-Mackey. Obviously, the field is feeling very similarly, 16% ownership coming in on him. I mean, this is a guy who's played 11 NHL games so far, all of which this season, taken 33 shots on goal in those games. So averaging, 3 shots on goal per game. Down in the American Hockey League this year, it's even higher, 3.6 shots on goal per game down in the AHL. So I don't mind getting to the second line here as well. Philip Heidel, Lecker-Mackey, minis feel pretty solid here. Hedel himself, 9.2 shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games as well. So I think honestly, more of my interest kind of comes in on this Anaheim Duck side of things. And maybe I'll just attack the Canucks a little heavier on the late slate for me. The Toronto Strome Terry, I mean, they're continuing to chug along offensively. I'm starting to see their numbers spike a little bit in the line stats here as well. 3.2 expected goals for per hour. It's a pretty solid clip there. And then that third line and that mini stack specifically around Cutter Gauthier and Mason McTavish. I mean, they were a thorn in the Oilers' side last night. Gauthier's shot volume really increased here as of late. So as his goal scoring, 1.6 goals per hour, 11.4 shots on goal per hour of ice time. Obviously, that ice time is fairly limited, only playing 13, 14 minutes per night. And Mason McTavish too. He's seen a real uptick in his offense as of late, 1.8 goals per hour over his last 20 with 8 shots on goal per hour. So I don't mind going in a little harder on this Anaheim Ducks side. Obviously, you got Jackson Lacombe there on the blue line. Absolutely dominated the Edmonton Oilers last night. A little bit upset with Jackson Lacombe. Heading into last night's game, he had hit his shot prop of over 1.5 in 8 of his last 10 games. He took only 1 shot last night. If he would have taken 2, I would have won a whole bunch of money last night on the betting streets. So a little bit bitter right now, but I'll go back to the Lacombe well here tonight as well. I don't mind doing that.
Yeah, I mean, let's just call a spade here. Calvin Pickard was horrendous last night. They only generated 2.2 expected goals for and scored 6. So I don't want to get too carried away here. This is still a Vancouver Canucks team that's been very, very good defensively. The penalty kill has been unbelievable. So I'm not going to get too carried away with the Ducks. I think that, they're fine. I still think that top line is the route to go for me. The third line does draw the best matchup, though, so you want to kind of ride that hot hand. Cutter Gauthier's numbers since the break have been much better. Second on the team with 15 shots on goal in 6 games. It's fine. Jackson Lacombe, I'll get back to him. He's been their best player for months now. But this is still a very good Vancouver Canucks team. I think that, or defensively, don't twist my words here. Very good defensive team, and I'm probably not going to have a ton of Anaheim. Sprinkle them in a little bit. That top line, that third line, maybe even a little bit of that second line. Very limited ownership, though, overall. Where on the Vancouver Canucks side of things, I do feel a little bit better here. But we just posted Vancouver without Hughes just feels wrong. At 5v5 this season, expected goals for with Quinn Hughes on the ice, 2.7. Without Quinn Hughes on the ice, 2. Rough. Real bad. Real bad. Okay, let's get to some defensemen. We've already talked about a handful of them, but let's talk about a few more. Okay, let's just first start at who the public is playing. They love Alex Vlasic tonight, highest owned defenseman on the slate. In terms of other cheap options, Phil Peronic for obvious reasons, Copeland Parayko, Cam Fowler, Connor Murphy, Alec Martinez, Jacob Trouba, Marcus Pettersson, Keandre Miller. In terms of the projections, who do the projections? We love the Ottawa Senators top 2 defensemen for obvious reasons, both over 6K, but the minute projections are just ginormous. Jackson Lacombe projected for 25 minutes at 5K. Yes. Philip Peronic projected for 27 minutes at $4,800. Absolutely. Brant Clark, I'm a little skeptical on how much ice time he's going to play, but he's expected to dress as the 6th defenseman tonight. I don't hate that. If he ends up seeing, 17 minutes, he grades out pretty well. Zub is a nice option, I think, too, just he plays a ton. I don't know how much shot block equity he has against the Blackhawks, but if you can't quite afford Sanderson Chabot, he's like the other guy that just doesn't come off the ice. Your boy Braden Schneider, Keandre Miller is a guy that I keep going back to. What is Zach Jones' price tonight? Because he just basically broke the slate the other night. He's up to $3,300. Still in power play 1. I don't hate getting back to him. Vlasic, yes. Marcus Pettersson, I think, obviously sees more ice time tonight with Quinn Hughes out, but also the other Elias Pettersson. He's not projected for many minutes here in the projection, so it won't stick out. But he is expected to play on the top pair of Phil Peronic. So I do think that comes with more ice time tonight, and more ice time should end up being a good thing for him. Let me just pull up his numbers here. He's really missing the net a ton. But he's taken 32 shot attempts in 10 games. He's only hit the net 8 times. But there is some sneaky shot volume potential there. He's blocked a fair amount of shots too. So I think there's some sneaky upside here with the other Elias Pettersson if he does see added ice time tonight playing with Phil Peronic. If he plays 18 minutes or something like that at $2,500, I don't mind getting to him a little bit tonight as just a 0% owned defenseman. Zach, who's really sticking out to you?
Yeah, I think he covered most of the names pretty well there. Artem Zub, I think he's an okay play. Braden Schneider, I mean, he's a guy that I've got a lot of interest in here. 7.7 blocked shots per hour over his last 20 games. Also has 6 points in 12 games against Capitals for some reason. Kind of an interesting mark there, but I think he covered it off pretty well here. Keandre Miller, I think he's an interesting guy to get back to here. Don't mind getting to the Chicago Blackhawks defenseman here as well, too. Alex Vlasic, $3,700. I think he's a fine play. Lucas Crevier, $2,600 on the top pairing. Blocks a good amount of shots. Connor Murphy, same sort of a thing there. And then, of course, my boy Wyatt Kaiser down there, $2,800 too. So don't mind targeting some of those depth defensemen here. But it got a lot of interest in this Sanderson-Chabot duo tonight. I think I'm going to have a lot of them and be over the field in my lineups.
As always, who's our shot block god of the night? Jacob Trouba, Connor Murphy tied at the top. Let's get to the goalies. Highest projected goalie is Linus Ullmark against the Blackhawks. Highest implied win percentage, lowest implied goals against on the slate, obviously. In terms of ownership tonight, most of it's coming in on Aiden Hill at $7,800. Boy, the public just loves Vegas tonight. Kevin Lankinen, number 2 at $8,400. Okay. I really like Jordan Binnington at $7,400. He's been playing awesome. We talked about the Kings' struggles. We know that Warren Fogle will have 5 shots on goal, so he should see plenty of shot volume tonight. Arvid Soderblom should see a ton of pills. If he has one of those kind of rare performances, I think he could be a bit of a chalk buster. I don't mind Joseph Woll. I don't think the Vegas Golden Knights have been all that strong, and I do think that he's a bit of a chalk buster tonight too. The public just likes Vegas a lot more than I do. So that'll be kind of interesting to see where Wool's ownership ends up coming in, but he's projected to be the lowest owned goalie on the slate at $7,600. I don't mind getting there. And I also mind getting to John Gibson. He has not been great. Don't get me wrong. This is a Quinn Hughes-less Vancouver Canucks team that doesn't score many goals. I do think that the Ducks can win this game too. And I think that Gibson at minimum price is fine. I'm a little surprised with how low Igor Shesterkin grades out. I'll get to him too at $7,900, but not like comfortably. We know he can have massive games. He can have real stinkers. It's kind of one or the other. I'm willing to take a few bets on him, but man, the shot volume for the Capitals really, really low. The tie for the second lowest or the second lowest overall tonight. So I talked about a lot of goalies there. I think I'm going to end up paying down for the most part. And a lot of Lindgren, or sorry, not a lot, Lindgren, Wool, Binnington, Gibson, Shesterkin for me. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I really like Joseph Woll here tonight. Jordan Binnington looks like a pretty solid play. I don't mind getting to a bit of Arvid Soderblom here tonight. Only 7K, really, really cheap to build around for him. On the same side, I don't mind getting to some here too. Only 8% ownership coming in on him, projected to have the highest value rating of any of the netminders here tonight. So I think he's a pretty solid play, all things considering. Worth noting with Ullmark, though, 2 wins and 4 games played against the Blackhawks in his career, just an .882 save percentage. So he's had a couple of real stinkers against Chicago throughout his career. But yeah, I think I'm okay getting there still. But yeah, Joseph Woll, man, at $7,600, that feels like a really nice play here for me. 1 game played against the Vegas Golden Knights in his career, came back in November, had a 31 save shutout in that game.
Oh, there you go. I have like Ullmark too. I kind of forgot about Ullmark there. Eric says I trust Gibson more than the Canucks at this point. And I mean, Gibson's last, I guess it would have been his first game back from injury, was not great. Gave up 6 goals and 24 shots against the Blackhawks. But prior to that, his previous 7 out, actually not prior to that, including that stinky outing, he still has a .919 save percentage in his last 7 appearances. So he hasn't been terrible. And this is a Canucks team that just cannot score goals. So I don't mind getting John Gibson as the lowest owned goalie on the night. Okay, we do not have a daily face-off. Our head-to-head lineup challenge is I did not have time to build a lineup. So we will get straight to the hat trick pick challenge. If you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. Not that actually at all. You can do that by dropping your hat trick pick in the comment section of the video, not the live chat. If your player scores a hat trick tonight, we'll get you a $25 gift card to Nation Gear, and you can pick up some daily face-off swag. If a player scores a hat trick and nobody picks him, we will raffle it off to anybody who submitted a hat trick pick. Zach, I don't know who won last night's head-to-head, but you won 2 nights ago, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt here and let you go first. Who is your hat trick pick?
Very sweet of you. Thank you, Brock. Let's go with Big Poppy, Austin Matthews. Let's see if he can get it done. Bust this slate open.
Very nice. Because I kind of talked shit about Ottawa 1 and not totally in love, I do love Tim Stützle, though. Just a tremendous hockey player. Absolutely love watching him. I wish he was a Detroit Red Wing. Unfortunately, he's not. We would all wish we could have a Tim Stützle on our team. I will take him. as my hat trick pick tonight. If you want to get $20 off your first month of RotoGrinders Premium, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. Shout out to them for providing projected ownership for today's show. Also in the link in the description, is the link to our DFO DFS Discord. I'm having a tough time here. We're running on low sleep here. It's trade deadline week. Join the DFO DFS Discord. Let's get out of here before I stumble over any more words. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow, hopefully, as long as there's no trades. Peace.